Bro. Welcome back to Hoochos. Today on Hoochos, we're going to be building this. This is a tabletop propagation / NFT hydroponic system that you can build yourself at home. So I've been a little bit lazy lately, and my laziness has led me to discover how little substrate the plants actually need within a system like this NFT. So if we have a look at something like this lettuce, we can see that the roots aren't taking up masses of space within the system. Now this is a very small lettuce, and you can see that I use the dregs of a rock wool cube to propagate it. So we'll pull out a full-size lettuce such as this, and even here we aren't seeing a mass of roots. So something like this lettuce can be propagated in a much smaller channel, such as this. This is PVC electrical conduit, and the benefit of this channel is it's almost exactly the same size as a 42mm Jiffy peat pellet. As well as that fact, we also have a top which can be removed. So this is going to make it really easy for us to create a lidded NFT propagation system, and perhaps even full-term plant NFT hydroponic system. The things you'll need. As with most builds, I'll be adjusting the build as we go, but the basic essentials are PVC conduit. Now this is Dita electrical 50mm by 25mm by 4m conduit. It cost me $16, so very cheap. And this one piece of conduit should do us for our whole system, because I'm not doing a full length system. I don't want the runs to be extremely long. I want them to be short, so that if any one plant clogs up the system, I don't lose all of the 4 meters of length. And this is also going to allow us to keep it compact for those of you who have not much space. We're also going to need some kind of 13mm tubing to run from our pump. Now, you're not going to need an excessively large pump for this. This is the AquaPro AP210. It runs 210 liters per hour, I assume. Yep, nice naming conventions, AquaPro. We'll also need some 4mm barbed offtakes to take from your 13mm tubing to your 4mm tubing. Where is it? 4mm tubing. And to adjust the flow rate, which I think is going to be necessary for this system, we'll use an inline tap, which will allow us to reduce the flow if the pump is too strong, but we'll tackle that when we get to it. You'll also need a reservoir. This is the handy storage 30 litre crate. It is food safe. We're also going to need a cutting implement, so I'll be using this cut-off tool. However, you can use whatever cutting implements you have available to you that will cut plastic, from drills to jigsaws to hacksaws, whatever is available to you. I'm also going to be gluing our PVC to our lid, and I'll just be using a plastic to plastic glue that you can find pretty much at any hardware store. First things first, let's cut our channel to the appropriate size. For this step, it's going to depend on how your lid will hold the channel. I've got a storage container here that has a lip around the whole lid, which is extremely useful. As you can see, I'm actually reusing this lid from a previous video where I grew cucumbers and cucamelons within a rock wool hydroponic system. And I'm reusing it because that system is no longer in use. It did work, however, it was really taxing because the changing of the reservoir meant you had to remove the whole plants. But with this system, we're only going to be having smaller plants and larger plants towards the end of the cycle, but they will be able to be lifted off the system like so. So we're going to measure out our conduit to the length of the lid, maybe a little bit shorter so that you have a little bit of wiggle room like this. And then we're going to take that measurement and repeat it along the length of our conduit. Change of plan. And while we're out here, I'm going to slice a hole in our lid, which is going to be the return for the mini rails. So we're just going to slice along the edge so that our rails fall back into the res underneath. Like so. Okay, now all of our holes are cut. We can position our channels out over the NFT. I'm not going to cut the top holes just yet. I want to see how many I can fit out, and then we're going to glue them down. The spacing of the channels is going to be dependent on the type of system you're building, essentially. If you're building a propagation system where you're going to have a heap of small plants and then be moving them into another system, you're going to want to place these channels as closely together as possible. In fact, probably either way, you're going to want to place these channels as closely together as possible, because realistically, even if you have a system where you're going to be growing them to full term, you can use the in-between spaces as propagation spaces anyway. So I'm going to be spacing them as closely together as I possibly can, and that is going to allow us to fit in as many plants as possible. Alternatively, if you have various sizes of propagation dome, you can fit these channels in a pattern that makes sense for those propagation domes, so that when you're propagating seedlings, you can have the propagation domes over only the seedlings. Now, this is probably what I'll be doing today, because I am most likely going to be using this as a propagation system rather than a full-term NFT. That is actually the perfect length for that dome. Look at that. I didn't even mean to do that. I'm pretty stoked with that. So we're going to leave some space at one end for our 4mm tubing to come out, and we're going to leave a little bit of space at the other end so that our NFT channels can run back down into the res. Now we're going to stick down our channels in place. So we're going to mark out our hole spacings in order to accommodate these. These are 42mm Jiffy cocoa pellets, and these have given me an idea, because when I left a tray very similar to this one a little too long, this happened. This is basically a herb garden within a propagation tray. We have oregano, chives, dill, basil. Over here we've got spinach, pak choi. We've got a little bit of everything within this system. There's even coriander over here at the back. This has all been propagated underneath the Spider Farmer SF600. And all I've been doing is watering into it with hydroponic nutrient. All of the roots are not consolidated within one Jiffy cocoa pellet. They would all be intermingled throughout all of the Jiffy pellets. Now this system is going to give us a way of separating the roots, except for along the channel obviously, but it's also going to allow us to get to a similar density as this. But the problem I've been having with this system is it requires me to top up the nutrient because of the density of the plants, probably once every few days. And I have let it go a bit dry sometimes, but these plants, as you can see, are just thriving in such a small footprint. And if I can get away with growing this much in a footprint the size of this, I think that many families will be able to grow a ton of greens in a footprint the size of our mini NFT. That is a beautiful bouquet of edible herbs and greens. I mean, just amazing. And all within a tray that big. And now that I've said that, I'm actually going to pack out these top rails of NFT with as many holes as I can, because I think that space will be enough for the continual harvesting of greens. If it gets too crowded, you can remove them and eat them, which is probably what's going to happen anyway. You just have to remove them in a way that spaces the plants out evenly. All right, so let's drill some holes. So as you can see, these 50mm rails perfectly house our 42mm cocoa pellet. And all we have to do now is mark out where we would like our holes. Now, just be mindful of where your propagation dome will be sitting. So mine will be sitting like that. So I'll be starting my pellets a little bit in from the ends so that they have space to breathe. And then I'm just gonna mark out and as densely as I possibly can drill the holes. We're going to grab a straight edge and then I'm going to fit them as closely as possible next to each other, but whilst also maintaining a slight gap. So I found that if you want to cut these holes, just get a piece of wood, cut out your hole saw center, and then you can just put your center hole in where you want it to go. Use the hole in the bottom piece of wood to actually stabilize yourself. And then what you want to do is you run it in reverse, and you're not trying to drill straight down. You're actually trying to drill left into the channel and then right into the channel. And this leaves the edges intact where the conduit actually runs down the rails. And that will give you some really nice, clean looking tops. And now our glue should be dry. How good. We can put our tops on and check that they still slide. It's gonna be a little bit tight because some of those holes will have damaged the rail a little bit, but oh, look at that. That is pretty cool. Oh, I'm really excited for this system. Okay, so now we're going to drill holes in this lid, which are going to feed this 4mm tubing up through the holes from the bottom res, where we'll have our 13mm tubing running from our pump. And now we can get to assembling the res. In the res, we're going to have our pump feeding into 13mm tube, which is going to have an end cap. And from this 13mm tube, we're going to have barbs coming off, one for each line into each NFT channel. So I'm actually switching from the flex tube to just normal plastic polyline because this is a lot easier to put barbs into. So just cut off a piece of that. We can punch some holes. At this other end, we're not even going to need to have a stopper because we can just zip tie it over, and the kink that it creates actually stops the flow. Zip tie that up, so stopper, and we'll punch out our holes for our 5 pipes. 1, 2, I'm actually going to put an elbow in it, and we can push our barbed offtakes into that. And the way that I do this, because it is impossible to do with your thumb, well, it's not impossible, it's just painful as. So, pop. And then to those we can attach our 4mm tubing. And they just slip straight over the top of the barbs. We can then put on our elbow. So that's all connected up, and we can connect that now to our pump. And I'm just gonna run a little zip tie around that. And that is the setup in the res. So we can add on our lid. Now before I cut the lines for the pump, I'm actually going to give the system its slope now. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm actually going to add in onto this lip something that raises the system. Now, this is something I'll probably have to play around with, but I'm going to raise it the width of a 13mm tube, and that is what I'm going to use to raise it. So I'm going to grab some tubing. We're going to cut that to the length of the container, and I'm just going to screw that directly to the top of the lip. So 3 screws going straight through our poly pipe, And now we've got a higher edge that this will sit on like so. All right, now we can run our lines up through the holes that we've made in the lid, and it just depends how you want them to enter the channel. I'm probably just going to shove the line in like this and then just have it over the edge like so, so that when the flow comes out, it's actually in the direction and down the channel the way that I want it to. I may play around with this and then have them loop back over and down into a hole, but we'll just see how the system performs once we've got water in it. I'm just going to run each pipe into each of the channels. And then around each pipe at the length that you prefer, we're just going to run a zip tie to keep it from pulling through that hole. There we go. Very nice. Very cool. Okay, now let's fill the system with water and see how the channels run. Here's the water. So at this point, I haven't actually added in a tap to the pump section. But if we need to restrict the flow, we will do that. I haven't put in a hole for the plug either. So we're just gonna run the plug up the drain part and we can power it that way. And now we can plug it in and see how the system performs. Okay, here goes. Oh wow, it's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to happen. Oh, I'm so excited. You can see how the water is passing down each one of the channels, and you can see here the flow rate. I haven't had to put a tap in, so there's no adjustment needed. You do not need that tap. This is perfect, because what's going to happen is as we place in each peat pellet is actually going to divert the water around it onto the next peat pellet. The pellets almost take up the whole channel as well. So this is actually, no matter where the flow in the channel is, it's bound to be touching the pellets. So I'm actually extremely happy with how this turned out. So the beauty of this system is that it will continually water or feed hydroponic nutrient to your seedlings held in Jiffy peat or cocoa pellets. Now, I've made this specifically to suit the 42mm pellets, but there are 37, I think, millimeter pellets, and this will work absolutely fine with the smaller peat pellets as well. And the ease and simplicity of this system is that you just drop the pellet in and the pellet rehydrates within the system itself without you having to soak and then drain the pellets. So this system gets the pellets the perfect amount of moist from the get-go. So I'm going to fill up this system with pellets and then we can plant our seeds. As you can see, I go through a fair few pellets. So I'm just going to drop the pellets in and they should rehydrate in place. Oh, it's almost like a game of Connect 4. It's like Connect 4 hydroponics. Okay, so it's actually been about 48 hours since I put these in, and one thing that I've noticed is that these 42mm cocoa pellets are probably not the ideal size for this channel. Really, you're going to want the smaller ones that are actually more available. These are just the ones I had on hand, and you can get them out, but they're kind of tight. So I would recommend going with the smaller, more available cocoa pellets or peat pellets, whatever your preference is, and you will have a better time. Once these have roots in them, they will become more unmanageable. So that is something to take into consideration. If you can find larger conduit, by all means, go for it. Just adapt the conduit or whatever you're using to the size of the substrate that you're using. If you're cutting up rock wool, cut it up smaller. There is absolutely no correlation whatsoever that I've found to the plant size and the propagation cube size. So the rock wool that you cut, the plants are going to grow roots out of it along the NFT. They don't care what they start in,
as long as the starting medium is moist and stays moist. So a small amount or a large amount is fine. We're not using the media for nutrition. We're using it to germinate the seed, and then the seed will use our system for the rest of their growth. So my advice would be stop thinking about a growing media as a nutritional supplement and start thinking about it as a germination conduit. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Hoochos. Plenty more to come, and happy hydroponicking. I'll see you next time.